welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today we are reviewing Lisa Frankenstein. I am joined by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp, the good old Nicolò Grasso, and Hilary White as we break down this newest adaptation of the Frankenstein lore, this time as a comedic and bloody teen adventure about learning to deal with your trauma, being comfortable in your own skin as a teenager, and of course, getting some bloody revenge to those who are assholes to you. This is a very fun film from earlier in the year that I'm excited we finally get to talk about. Definitely being more of a teen comedy. We definitely have some interesting conversations in here. Some of us really take an analytical lens. I will say we even get into maybe our most heated debate in recent memory here. This is definitely a fun episode, definitely an interesting episode as we continue our road to Halloween, and I am so excited that you are here joining us today. One quick note I will say is that my microphone is probably going to be awful in this. I'll be really honest. One of my cords one of my connections plugging in my microphone to my computer was broken, so I had to last minute switch to recording with my computer audio, so hopefully it sounds okay. Obviously now that has been fixed, so it won't be an issue moving forward, but just know if you're like, wow, Carson sounds really bad today, that is why. So that just FYI, I apologize for that. Now let's get to our review of Lisa Frankenstein. Okay, and to start out today, Hilary, I would love to hear your thoughts first today. What are your opening thoughts on Lisa Frankenstein? Obviously, this is somewhat a new release, but did you see it earlier this year? Just what is your opening take on the film?
The film was a surprise for me because I saw the trailer, I don't know how many times before their films, and it was a trailer that I thought, this is not made for me. I'm not interested in seeing this. This seems just way too wacky and probably is going to be super, super bad. But I had two friends of mine. It was funny. They were both men. They're my age. And then they said, let's go see Lisa Frankenstein. I went, okay. So we went and saw it, and it was so surprising. It was so funny. And we were just cracking up laughing during some of the sequences that I'm sure we'll get into later. So it was one of those films that proved me wrong. The impression I had of them was completely different than what it actually was, and I ended up having a really good time.
I can hop in quickly because I fully agree with you. My goal in 2024, and this is going to sound a bit weird, is I wanted to see less movies than I've ever seen before as far as new releases. I was extremely burnt out trying to watch 300 new films a year, 250 which are absolute garbage. So I really only wanted to watch things in theater I was interested in seeing, and I was not going to watch Lisa Frankenstein, but I was like, you know what? One night I was really in the mood to go to the cinema. It came out, I want to say in February, so there really wasn't that much else out. I was still waiting for Driveway Dolls, which turned out to be absolutely horrific. But I randomly decided to take a chance on Lisa Frankenstein and loved it. I thought this was such a fun film. Obviously, there's a reason we're talking about it here today, is because I like this film quite a bit. It was this or Kenneth Branagh's piece of crap, and granted, thank God we didn't talk about that. Super, super fun. Great visual style. I love the performances here. There's a weird amount of heart mixed with a great amount of, I don't know if I want to say camp. I feel like it's really like trying to go for camp, and I don't know if that actually like then is camp. But there is a great like sensibility here of enjoyment and fun. Maybe not the most developed film when it comes to like thesis and heart and message, and we're probably not going to come around here and have like an I Saw the TV Glow episode where we talk about how this film impacted us. But I still really greatly enjoyed this and had just like, I think this is probably one of the most fun experiences I've had in the theater all year long. And it's one that just really caught me off guard, especially the performances. I think the performances here are really spectacular.
I can go next. Mine's a little different. I didn't watch this in the cinema. I don't know if it ever showed anywhere near me. I watched this. I was working away at the time, and I was watching it on my iPad. I think it was on Amazon Prime or something. And I don't even know what the emphasis was to even watch it. I think it was just there, and I was like, oh, I quite like Catherine Newton. You know, I'll see what this is about. And I went in with absolutely no knowledge. I know that there was sort of like ripples of Heathers in here. But I had absolutely no expectation, and I enjoyed it, and I think this was in April, so it's quite a close proximity of watching it again, and I like it again. I just don't think there's enough here on the conviction of what it wants to try and say. It's a strange film in social commentary meets tone and thematic for me. I think that I might come at it from a different way to you, Carson. I think as a debut, it's a really interesting feature. But there's so much here that wants to get out there, and I think it has really, not that it finds it tough, but I think there's a lot to get through and a lot that it wants to touch upon. There's a lot of quite poignant stuff. There's a few pieces of quite profound material, and then it skirts back to wanting being quite fun and dumb. And I like that. I think for an average audience, I think it quite works. But there's a lot here, and it reminds me, interesting enough, that when we did The Watchers, Ashana Shyamalan's feature, but later on I'm going to compare the two because I think there's an interesting parallel between them in visual style and conviction, both as debuts. I'll leave that for them, but I find this enjoyable. But within the pantheon of what these type of films can be, like the Jennifer's Bodies of its time, I'm going to mention loads more later on. It doesn't really stand out for me. I'm not necessarily sure what I would go back for here. I think it's one of those features where this is probably the wrong. Ironically enough, if it was in the 80s, I think this would be a staple. I think it would be a cult classic. But the problem with the saturation of today's market, I think this just gets lost, unfortunately, which is quite sad. Because I think anyone who watches this and sort of wants to take nibbles and little bites of things, I think this is really enjoyable for horror audiences, especially for like fans of Catherine Newton, which again, like on a really good rise of being a scream queen. And I think this is one of those type of features where people will look back and they'll be like, "Oh, have you seen? What's Lisa Frankenstein? Catherine Newton's in that." And I think it will have like a really good second, third, fourth wind. But at the moment, I think it's going to be interesting to see what Zelda Williams does next. Just to see that progression. I think after looking back on this, I think we'll get a better overall view in hindsight about if this is just a director who's trying to formulate things a little bit too early, or if this is how Zelda Williams sort of projects her sort of emphasis on screen. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm really excited about it, but I enjoyed it for the most part once again.
I feel the same to Jack, actually. I think it's a first for this podcast. Um, I have to say, I went into this excited. I also watched it at home. I didn't watch it in the cinemas. I don't think it even came out in Italian cinemas, sadly. So I had to rent it. But I do like Diablo Cody. I really like Jennifer's Body. So, I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I had hopes for Zelda Williams. And I have to say, of all the problems that I have with the film, the direction is definitely my biggest one. I think it's very flat, sadly. I think that the actors, like you said, Carson, are amazing. Everyone is committed, gives it 100%. Catherine Newton with this and Abigail and other films, like she's a proper star now of horror comedies, kind of. Cole Sprouse also, shout out to him for having basically a wordless performance for the entire film and doing so much through physicality. There's a lot of very clever gags with him and visual gags and slapstick and whatnot. Um, but ultimately, I just wish the film had more. I don't know if substance is the right term or style. I just wish it had something more to it, more of an edge. It felt very bold narratively, but the actual execution felt a bit sanitized, which is weird because it's a PG-13 film that's pushing that rating in ways that aren't as successful as I think they thought they were doing. Mainly because so many parts that are very, very dark, and that's something that I appreciate about this film. It's a dark comedy that's not afraid to get very mean, very violent, um, but I don't know. There's just something in the way that everyone reacts to things. It's a very low stakes film, almost to a fault. I don't know how to describe it. It's very hard to make a dark comedy. It's very hard to make a period piece because this is all set in the 80s. So, the throwback element is very prevalent. Um, I don't know, it was just missing that extra something to truly make it work. It's not properly campy enough to be enjoyable in that sense. It's a bit too self-aware to truly make me feel immersed in this story. Um, and so many parts just kind of like landed in a very okay kind of way. It's not a special film, even though it has special things about it. I'm excited to talk about the ending, especially, which I think is very interesting. And yeah, like everyone else, though, did an amazing job. Like, cast is great, writing was very solid. There's a lot of moments that actually had me chuckle, and it was just very enjoyable, very pleasant. But sadly, nothing more for me.
So maybe we want to jump into a conversation. I think we're having a little bit of a debate here on like the actual substance of the film, because I think Nick, maybe I agree more with you than I do with Jack as far as like what this film actually has to offer as far as substance. But Jack, you said that you saw a lot here. Do you want to maybe take the reins first with saying what you saw within the film, and then we can kind of either
Yeah,
agree
of
or
course.
rebuke?
I think it's an interesting one because it's basically two-pronged for me. There's a social commentary discourse which is relevant then, now, for the high school sort of format, and then there's sort of a more tonal discourse of like having comedic endeavor. The two of them, I think, struggle to be sort of coerced together. And having watched Heather's not so long ago, and watching those type of features, I think it takes something to be quite poignant, but it's got to be something that the abstract feels not necessarily like even satire, but relevant to the circumstance of what's happening. So just to make the sense of that is that Heather's works because it's real. I think with Lisa Frankenstein, you have the first sort of 15 minutes of this, and it sort of it conjures up this idea of like social commentary. Um, there's quite dark, not even sort of like subconscious, like conscious conversations of um, potential abuse and stuff like that, and 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 how that happens, and the 80s type of issues of being the outcast, which is very much prevalent even till today. Don't get me wrong, especially what's happening in sort of schools and stuff. But I think you have that sort of discourse, which I think is quite interesting. Feel that this film slightly uses that within the context of that's the catalyst to then go into a different avenue, which then comedically takes over into almost like farce. And I think the two of them feel weird. Like it's hard to explain, but the very base of it, I don't feel that they come together very well. How you conjoin the two, I think, has to come from a really creative writing perspective. I think you've got to go really down the satire. I think like Promising Young Woman by Emerald Fennell, love it or hate her, or love it or hate the films. There's an intriguing premise there to use real world consequence and try tonally, thematically, change that a little bit and have your audience think for themselves, and also leave with a quite hefty remark, and even if a mark on itself. I think Lisa Frankenstein begins with that and then falters into something where, oh, we're just going to have like a comedic farce here. I don't particularly find that like troubling to watch. I don't find it to be excruciating at all. I think that's quite fun in its own right. But it's interesting that this starts with something ever so poignant and ever so sort of entangled in the audience into this thematic where you were going down like quite an extremely dark route here. I think it just juxtaposes that a bit too harsh for me. I hope that answers your question, but that's the only reason where I come from. Because otherwise, I think the comedic endeavor here by what Williams does, I think it's a really interesting and fun film. I think it's fun comedically. It's fun on a satire level almost. I think it's fun in a meta type of context. I also think it's quite funny that it's able to sort of make fun of itself in a gimmick sort of way. We're talking about some people getting burnt in a sunbed, and we're having like people dying and stuff like that. It's an interesting companion piece. I can't help but consistently compare it to Heather's because there's so much vulgarity in that. There's so much ridiculous consequence, but there's something quite poignantly put through there where we're still dealing with kids, like just having a difficulty expressing themselves, or feeling that that's the projection to go, that the suffering of being, the suffering making other people suffer. And I think this is a film that starts very similar to that, where you think, oh, maybe that's going to be the route where Lisa Frankenstein is, she's going to kill these people, and then the farce is going to be that they're going to be the undead. It sort of doesn't really go that way, does it? It goes more sort of the principle way, the conventional love thing, when I think it sort of gets lost in its own silliness at times. I think that answers your question. I hope that's answered it a little bit.
I also think for me there's this strange kind of duality, like throughout the film, on how I was supposed to view Lisa Frankenstein and view Lisa and view the creature, I guess, because it does start very like silly. There's a lot of justification for what she is doing, because she is ultimately hurting a lot of people, and then very quickly over the course of the film she turns very almost villainous, but still in like a girl boss way, where it's very funny, it's very comedic still, but then you have like these weird interjections of like her and her sister. And I think her sister is like a really interesting character, because you're always waiting for that shoe to drop, because that's a very natural narrative. It's like, oh, she seems like she's being nice, but really she's kind of catty and bitchy. But like, she's a very authentic character seemingly. And towards the end, you get this really like weird heart to heart where like, I will say for the ending especially, I feel like the layers between the balance between this film being, this is really campy, this is fun, this is girl bossy, yes queen, like kill these people, sew that dick onto your monster, and the side of like, you're really actually harming innocent people, and it's not really that fun when she's sitting there like fully traumatized, shaking in her seat because she's afraid because you killed her mom. There is a duality there that I don't know if that fully sticks. I will say that is the one area where I really think like, if you want to buy into this, and I kind of wish it did just go more campy, more traditional almost in some ways, where like, I don't think you needed to necessarily try to walk that line, because this is not a film that necessarily has a voice behind it that I found overly deserving to have that conversation or try to walk that emotional tightrope. Nonetheless, I still think it didn't bother me overly, but just like, I always felt that sister character was a weird addition.
Yeah, it feels like a first draft. It feels like,
Yeah.
let's add in more perspective for Catherine Newton's character. Let's have her present as these acts, and then we need a ripple effect surrounding her to make them the actions to be even more boisterous, but also more gripping and more thrilling, and even more like tonally as a dissonance, because the actions that are happening, like there's actually moments where I guess the perspective is that you present a character who's an anti-hero almost, or like just this character who feels undone by unjust, and then slowly becomes a villain. I think there's an interesting parallel there. There's an interesting grotesque nature of well, then the question is, what's got comes first? There go the chicken in that scenario, which I think is interesting. But I think it does sort of project her too far as this villainous, horrible, and almost like repelling figure when it gets to that point, especially when you get to the ending and it's almost like, well, that character seems to have got everything that she wanted, and that the uh, surroundings ripple effect just feels like really terrible type of environment. I just think there's like tonal imbalances there. But that being said, it is an interesting, it is a really interesting perspective to have. It's a really interesting journey to go on here, because it's very much difficult to bond or to find emotional or even like investment or engagement with this character, because the actions are so cruel and indicative. Sorry, but I also think that's an interesting conversation to have about the female perspective and the male gaze and a female gaze as well, because how many times have we seen a male like American Psycho, where we watch someone who's not very charming, very vulgar, go out and do horrible things, and yet that's an interesting venture to have as a male perspective, like chopping up women, gratuitous sex scenes, and then you see it from a female perspective, and the change of dynamic feels very much um, uh, charged. And I think it's still an interesting thing to just see a character presented as very very stoic, very very internal, and as the film progresses and she gets into this vulgarity, let's say, or even just this evil expression, she becomes more confident, and then we then back away. I think that's a really interesting dynamic to watch, and how it's progressed, how far we're willing to watch our character progress down a horrible slippery slope, and how far the audience will accept what she does as righteous. Where do we draw the line? I think even in this is presented really quite well, and to that degree, I think the film generally succeeds regardless of how interesting that conversation is. I just think that that's not the first and foremost um, aspect of where this film wants to present itself. I think it's quite surface throughout that, and I think if this was a second or third draft, and this is where I'm not going to bring it up now, but I'll bring it up later with the watchers. I think if this film comes out as a sophomore effort or even a third feature, I think this then becomes really really tight, really well written, and I think it has an interest. As I think the voice behind it knows when to cut certain things out to retain other things, to resist other urges to go different avenues, because it is very much like you said about this family dynamic. It's just torturous to watch for the character. It's torturous to watch for the audience, and the lack of sympathy there, because she doesn't do that like you said, that twist aspect of like, oh, it'll turn out that this person's a horrible character. She's just not. She's just very much like, passive. I think it's just very difficult to watch, but maybe that's the perspective of what she's trying to project in the film, is that we're assigned to think that. But that's me reading into it. I don't, like I said, I don't think that's. Unfortunately, I don't think that's surface. I think we're just presented what we get, and I think tonally, I think it's quite difficult for an audience to, um, excuse me, what's the word when an audience go on a journey with something or something. I don't know. Just to have
Like
to
buy
bond with,
in.
let's say, yeah. But that's just my perspective anyway.
See, I'd love to hear what Nick and Hillary say, but I will say I think like the film itself, and it's Diablo Cody writing the script, and I have very like I have no connection to Diablo Cody. I don't really love Jennifer's Body, to be honest. I think like Tully is quite good. It's fine.
No.
It's fine.
Oh my
It's like
god, that
it's whatever.
sentence. I hope that's a hook there, because that is brutal.
Whatever. It's good. It's like not terrible. I think this is better all around. But like there is bits here where it's like it would be really interesting to also though dive into our main character's relationship to trauma, with as far as what she witnessed or heard, I guess, with her mother. Like there is little pieces here that's like it's weird that never really comes back. It's weird that like never joins the conversation, because there is a lot of depth with this character. And to be fair, I think we're breaking down like a character in a movie that necessarily did not ask for this like critical examination.
Yeah,
So I want to be clear to everyone listening. Like,
yeah.
I still think it's really fun. I give this 3.5. It's really still all this you can like just go and enjoy, and it has so many great funny moments. So maybe being a little bit unfair here with this conversation, but like I do think there was a lot here to create a real, all like the puzzle pieces almost, to create like a really nuanced, engaging, interesting character. I don't know if it's the Diablo Cody of it. I don't know if it's the director behind it. I don't know what exactly caused it, but it never feels like it's interested in actually building that puzzle. Instead, it just kind of uses the pieces to be like, look, it's all there, but we're more interested in having this fun time, which is fine because it is a comedy. This is supposed to be funny, and it was fun. But it does feel like maybe it was a sophomore effort. Maybe if there was another voice behind it, like maybe a couple more. What this reads to me is not this was a first draft. This reads to me like they had a really strong couple drafts and they just kept editing and kept adding to it when they didn't need to. I feel like it could have been a little bit bigger, a little bit higher in that. But I still thought it was very fun. So I just want to be clear to the audience at home. Still a very fun comedy. We are being freaks and talking about it on this level, not the movie. But I'd love to hear what Nick and Hillary think of this all.
Nick, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can be brief about it. Yeah, like for me, pretty much everything that Jack said that he wanted, that you wanted from the film, pretty much Jennifer's Body gave that to me. I think I was very fascinated in some ways, but the more, because like I watched this movie almost like 10 days ago at this point, so I've had time to digest it and think it over. there were some parts that felt subversive at first that actually in retrospect feel more like either weak direction or honestly maybe even just like weak writing, like you were saying, like it's maybe it needed like an extra draft or something, an extra look through, because everything related to Lisa's trauma and the fact that there's this whole thing about like, oh, this masked killer came into the house and murdered the mom, like it's told in a very throwaway fashion, which was fun. It's played as a gag, but then I was thinking, oh, this will definitely come back later. We will definitely have a reveal of who the killer is, because these types of movies always have a moment like that. But it doesn't. It never goes in that direction. They play a little bit with, oh, maybe she actually killed the mom. But again, like it's mentioned a couple of times, and then it's like they go over it. I don't know if it's something that needed to be part of the film, having this element of like there's a serial killer and oh my god, who is it? Oh, it's all connected to some bigger mystery. I don't know. Like it already feels a little bit overstuffed, and also like it doesn't go into much depth with any of its elements. But also I can kind of respect the loose nature of it. It's a balance. At the end of the day, it's a balance, which is always the hardest thing to do when making a film. Like, which direction do you go? I do wish it was more character based than it is now. I am not a fan of how they. It's not that I'm not a fan of how they joke about death and murder. I'm very much pro dark comedies, pro messed up cinema. I love that. I ate it up. I want to make films like that. Um, but there's something very disturbing about the ending. I don't know if we can already go into that or we can talk about it later. But I was watching it. I was like, oh, okay, so we're doing this now. And we're painting it in a very romantic way, which feels very odd, especially considering how many other movies received backlash for portraying that type of act in a kind of like glamorized way. Movies and games, even there's some video games that use this as a narrative device for climaxes that always feels very exploitative. So I was odd. Like it's a very very odd film, just tonally. I do think, like personally, I think it would work better if they embrace the horror element of it more, make it R-rated, make it more about just the exploitation side of things. Like make it like a proper 80s movies. Like Jack said with Heathers and other films from that time, like they all exist in this heightened plane of reality that is so delightful. And here it feels very cartoonish, aimed at a very young audience, but also they have a lot of sex jokes. There's sex toys in the film, which is something you barely see even nowadays, which was refreshing but surprising nonetheless. Um, and I don't know, like there's something so I don't know. I was weirdly upset by just how nonchalant they are with death and killing in a way that didn't really feel as jokey as they envisioned. And this is coming from someone who absolutely adores like pink flamingos, which is way more depraved than anything in this movie. But the way John Waters goes about it, or so many other filmmakers go about it, works. In here, the two sides don't really fit. The quirky coming of age teen comedy doesn't really fit with the gruesome bringing back the dead and building Frankenstein, like the creature, back to life and back to looking like a very hot boy. I don't know how you feel, Hillary, about all of those things.
No, this has all been very interesting to hear, and I'm really surprised that I'm about to say this, but I think I'm the only one out of the four of us that's fine with the film the way it was, or the way it came out. One thing I can tell you guys, though, that I did find out, I did some reading about the making of this film, was that it was shot to be an R-rated film, and then they pulled it back. There's one scene that I'm sure we'll discuss later. It's probably the most violent act that happened in the film. And when they shot it, there was blood everywhere. It was much more graphic. And when whatever intervention happened, and they said, this is going to be PG-13, a lot of the blood and gore was digitally removed, even into the scene that happens afterwards in the car. They had to digitally remove how much blood there actually was. I think the way that I see this film is it's a parable. It's such a heightened version of reality that the violence in it doesn't bother me very much because it almost seems kind of like a, I mean, I didn't read them, but like a book, like a Goosebumps book, or like some really, really, I don't, once again, I want to use that word camp, and camp is not the right word. When Carson used that word, I'm like, it's too heterosexual to be camp. Like there has to be like more subversion involved in order for it to be at that level. But I think what eventually clicked for me, what made the film work for me actually, was something that someone else wrote about the film. And once they mentioned this, everything snapped into place. And I thought, okay, I understand this film. And this is coming from someone who also doesn't like Diablo Cody too much. I think that if all of us said like which films that she's written that we like the most, it seems like it'd be different for all four of us. I'm surprised to say that this one even appealed to me at all, because usually if I see that name, I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is for me, you know? And I did talk to some friends about it before doing this podcast. And I said, this is something that, should survive on word of mouth. And I think particularly like teenagers watching this, as long as they're not taking it too seriously, it would probably go over really well with them. But what worked for me goes back to something that Carson mentioned, which was about trauma. I think that very often when we see a scene like this, and it was a misstep showing how her mother was murdered by a mass killer, although at the same time, like revisiting the scene, it's like, is this just a version of the story that kids are telling each other about what happened? And maybe it wasn't as operatic as it actually was. Someone broke into the house and killed her mom, but it wasn't like something out of a movie. That like we're seeing the version that kids are telling each other. But it's the fact that no one takes Lisa's trauma seriously. That is the big problem that roots this entire movie. She has something horrible happen to her, and if it's not addressed throughout the rest of the film, which I guess like we could view as a misstep. It does seem like a plot point that should be revisited, but I think maybe in a weird way, that plot point is the point, is that no one talks about what happened. And one of the scenes that didn't quite jive with me the first time I watched it, and once this thing was explained to me, it made a lot more sense, was the scene after she and Taffy are in the car and Lisa goes one way and Taffy goes the other. And Taffy's walking along, her pants are missing. She's wearing a baggy shirt. She has blood on her. She looks disheveled, and a car comes by and there's a guy in it, and he just drives right past her and pretends he didn't see her. And she just stands there. It's this really, really sad moment that seems dissonant in the film. I thought, like, why is that in there? It was like, that wasn't a joke. It's not meant to be funny. Maybe some people did laugh in the theater when they saw it. But I think what the film is trying to illustrate here, when people are traumatized, I think particularly women and girls who are traumatized aren't taken seriously, they're going to find their own ways to cope with it that aren't necessarily healthy. And of course, it was pointed out to me that this monster coming into her life, her obsession with death, the fact that she wants to be dead, ends up materializing in her house. And that it's something passive that she can talk to, he can't speak, and I'm sure that we'll talk about that later, is that every single kill that happens, as cruel as it is, the characters that they kill are so cartoonishly evil in one way or another. It's, well, not all of them, but at least the first two. There's thing that what's taken from them actually is a symbol of something. And someone mentioned it's like they take her stepmother's ear and put it on the monster because she never listened to her. The monster listens to her. They cut off the boy's hand. What was his name? Doug or something? Like Doug's hand was used to sexually assault her. The monster takes it and uses it and touches her the way that she should be touched. And then lastly, of course, the penis getting lopped off of a guy who broke her heart, and he takes it and he takes her virginity. He shows her what it means to be loved. So all these pieces, these murders that happen, as gruesome as they are incorporated into this monster that she's kind of fostering and forming a relationship with. And they have a love story, which seems, kind of course, like kind of disgusting. And maybe in some ways there is kind of a queer lens to it, like falling in love with a dead guy who's I think, what is it? He cries and she says, "You smell like a hot toilet at a carnival," or something. Um, the body horror aspects of it. Once that I realized that was what might be behind the story, it made sense to me. And even like the father and her sister Taffy, I think the sister Taffy is very subversive because we do expect her to, the other shoe to drop and for her to be evil. But I've experienced this in real life. There are people who are so nice and they mean very well. But if you've been through something like, in this case, like your mother being hacked to death, possibly in front of you, people don't know how to deal with your trauma and they don't want to see it and they aren't really honest with you and they're not helpful in any way. Her father's probably the greatest example of that. Like, he's not a bad person. He doesn't see anything. And it's that the monster sees her. And I think that's where there is some meaning in this film. Um, that makes it, I think, more substantial than I thought it was ever going to be. I thought it was going to just be a slasher, kind of like what you were saying, like, they kill people and she builds a boy and they're in love. Like, that wouldn't do anything for me. But once I realized that was going on, the film became a completely different story to me.
So I find that fascinating. That reading there is exactly why I quite like the film, and I think that's my point about surface, and then the deeper sort of texture about this film. It's just a shame that the reading that Hillary's got, which I think is definitely conscious, there's too many variables for there to be sort of independent. I think if that was a bit more on the nose, I think this would be really great of taking that and having an actual conversation. I think the fact that it leaves it a little bit too much in the dark, I don't think it gives enough gravitas for the situation at hand of what this film's actually about. I also think as well, and not to go into sort of the too deep into the specifics of the feature, but one issue I have with a lot of these types of films is that when you've got a very much expressive visionary as a writer, which is Diablo Cody, and you have a director, and it doesn't help that this is a directorial debut either. I know that Zelda Williams has made two documentaries, very much sex positive, and I think another one is sort of more a horror documentary as well. So I'm not trying to insinuate that she's not capable behind the camera. Very much like, again, The Watchers with Ashana, very capable behind the camera. I think the problem is that when you've got like I said, a very vivid expression within the writing with words and how things are meant to be tonally and thematically. When you have a director who is coming in, still formulating an opinion, still formulating a vision, and having to translate that of words that are not theirs, words and expressions and textures that Hillary just pointed out there. I think that if you're not, and they're going to sound really patronising and really condescending, but if you're not, if you haven't written that and you don't know the little tiny details and the merits of those little details, I think they go amiss. And I think there's a massive issue here between writing and direction. I don't think these two correlate together. It doesn't feel like the person who wrote this directed it, and it sure as shit doesn't feel like the director wrote it, or the writer directed it, should I say. It feels like there's two totally different imbalances here of someone who has a vision, who's writing, and then allowed it to be expressed by someone else, and I just don't think that's picked up. I don't know the production history of this. I'd be very interested to know how much Zelda Williams had within the production of rewriting this, or if it was there was sort of fractures of her writing a little bit more into this and writing about that, because there's a lot here that feels the if you take away the fat here and you look at the actual embodiment of this feature, it very much feels akin to Jennifer's Body, which I think Diablo Cody's also said it's set in the same universe. Regardless of that, I don't think there's much merit to it, but I think that you can see there's a poignancy and there's a profound nature of sexuality, social commentary, expression of female form, sexual fluidity. There's also patriarchal dynamics. There's also the cultural dynamics of being taken advantage of as a young woman, even as young girls, seeing as symbols for things or perspectives of the male gaze, and how that's then taken away and then taken as a revenge factor in both features. I think they're very much the same things. It's the abstract here that feels very much like Zelda's input. That's just from my perspective. and maybe this is where I might contradict myself about where she's put her own opinion on, but I think those expressions on top of a dialogue that's quite socially conscious and extremely interesting in its heavy-hittedness, I just don't think they work together, which is a shame because it's like what you said about Pink Flamingos, Nick. John Waters is the perfect sort of embodiment of having a social discourse and using the utmost profanity, the utmost ludicrous nature to get that on screen, but have like a backbone of actually saying something. And I think a lot of great comedic endeavors, or a lot of, like, again, Heathers, and there's a lot of other stuff like that as well. They come from a time where you can get the two things to come together really well. I just think this film fails on that, and then that leads me into the question of like, well, if it fails on both of them coming together, you as an audience member, and I think it's what happened in this conversation. You either come at one angle, and then you come at the other. And I think Carson, not to speak for you, I think you come at the angle of surface. Nothing wrong with that, and I think me and Hillary come from the angle of trying to find something deeper. And it's interesting the perspective of the mass audiences here. I think that's why it's such like a middle ground feature, because I think people like one aspect and not the other, and vice versa. And I'd be fascinated to find someone who thinks it all works like perfectly. I'd love to like see a genuine 5-star review, but a really good write up of why. Hopefully Carson's gonna write his heart out after they defend this to the hills. But that's where I come from. But again, like Hillary's reading, I think that's really interesting. And I think if this was maybe that's why there's an R-rated pushback there of like, let's just tone this down, because I think for a young audience, I think Heathers getting re-released now or being made now could not come at a better time. I think Lisa Frankenstein is a perfect embodiment of there's a lot to say here, and we can sugarcoat this, and when someone leaves and they start realizing, well, he's got that hand because of that, and then the ear because her mother doesn't listen. Oh, right. I just think that reading's just not clear and accurate, and I just wish it was just a little bit more, had a bit more clarity to it, and I think this would really do well. But alas, I just think it's just a bit too blurry for me, and I think it's chalk and cheese, unfortunately.
I like that we all were like, we're coming at this from so many different angles, and we actually are all just saying pretty much exactly the same thing. I fully agree with what Hillary is saying as far as that being there. My thing is I wish the trauma just, and there's like two conversations around this where I'm happy. The point, you cannot make this movie where all the characters in the movie are like, oh, I'm respecting your trauma and I respect that you need space. That's the catalyst of this whole thing, right? So I have no issue. I'm not saying that. I am saying the film itself should have brought the trauma back in that final conversation to do what you're saying, Jack, to a point and hit the nail on the head a little bit harder. That's what I'm saying with it. I think, again, all the pieces are there. You need that focus. You need to not maybe explicitly, but you need to give the audience some connection to, oh, these actions were from a point of desperation because she has this trauma and she feels like she is nobody. That same desperation, that same trauma specifically tied to the mom. And there's like a very small throwaway line where she does basically say this, but she says, I judge you to her sister because I had these issues with my mom and I thought you wouldn't have been there for me, and it subverted my expectations. And the point is, I should have given you a fair shake, but I didn't, because the abuse and trauma that was happening from everyone around me due to not respecting my trauma and listening to my mother die and having to move in this new home, getting threatened to go to the psych ward every single week by this like overly comedically evil mother figure in the household. That's all there. And you can read that, but the film itself is making you work for it, which is fine to a point. But I think you could have just been a little bit clearer, and that would have made the morals of the end hit a little bit harder if you really had the bigger emotional orgasm, let's say, at the end there, for lack of better words. Like, that it all just comes out and you have that big scene at the end, and that is where you turn Lisa into a tragic figure. You get into the Frankenstein narrative where these are flawed characters who are doing damage, but it's out of a place of desperation. Like, that is where that all becomes like poetry. It becomes poetic. It becomes an elevated feature. And again, those are all in the film. It just doesn't, for me, deliver that. So all I'm left with is I'm not able to swim on that. I'm able to swim on what's on the surface, and say there are pieces here. But this could have been a 4-star film. Could have been a 4.5-star film. ultimately it's a 3.5, which is
Why
not
do you
bad.
think? Why? What is it for you that? Why don't you think it takes that? Because obviously we've spoke about specifically the reasons why it doesn't really work, and there's issues here and there. But what stops it from your opinion to get to that level then? Like, you think it's
I
just
don't
the
think there's the
writing?
follow through. I think it's the writing. I think the writing fails to have that follow through, and it fails to portray in the final act, let's say, a point where it really ties that all in together in a way where a John Waters film would. And I'm happy we're bringing up John Waters, and thank God we did that John Waters episode because we refer to it every single week now. John Waters always has that moment at the end where it all comes together. You have that big emotional moment, and it's all there, whether it's in Pink Flamingos. Female Trouble is probably my favorite example. Everyone, please watch Female Trouble. It's like the most underrated John Waters film. It always has that point where that thesis gets reinstated, gets put onto this really emotionally gravitas, like powerful way to where like, oh shit, I see the depth, I feel the depth. Here, I guess I see the depth, I don't feel the depth, and I feel like it could have hit harder in the end. But again, I think this film also has this like warring identity. We mentioned it being bumped from an R to a PG-13. Undeniably, I think with the casting of Cole Sprouse, and he's really great in this. I don't want to like disparage his name, but this is ultimately also trying to be what is something that teenagers will like to go to and have fun with so we can make money. And there's that side of the film that I think it really kind of gets hung up on, where it's trying to be accessible and it's trying to be digestible. And I think when it comes time to like, okay, we can write the big scene, we can write this big moment, it tries to choose something more digestible for teenagers at sleepovers, which is fine again, but like I just feel like there could have been more here,
That's
but it's
why I
not a
don't.
lack of it.
Yeah, that's why I don't like Tully, because I think Tully has a really very, very poignant and quite profound conversation, an aspect um of the life of a woman, let's say, that doesn't really get projected on screen either very well in this on a cinematic level, but it's mostly like used in TV about the jaded woman, the pain in the ass. Oh my god, like her life's so fucking hard because she's raising kids, and like I think it comes across like when you get that on television, like you get like Malcolm in the Middle's mum. Like it's always like a matriarchal thing where it's always used as either comedically or it's very much underdeveloped, or it's used in a scapegoat manner to be like, well, Walter White's wife was a bitch. Well, not really, because like she had a lot of stress to deal with and trauma, and the reasons why she does certain things is a consequence of her husband's actions. Like he's not a saint. I think Tully's one like this where you have a really interesting conversation if it's about identity again, like sexual freedom, whatever it is. And Tully goes like 3/4 for me, and then it tries to elevate the material within the narrative and do something like what? And I think it just undermines everything that came before it. Not that it needs to be such a strict kitchen sink type drama, but you have like 3/4 of a really really interesting film, and then you get something I'm like, why have we just like sort of undermined that? And I think the same thing slightly happens here. Like what you said, like we have something really good to talk about, and I just don't know how it narratively gets like from A to B to C. And the only one of Diablo Cody's one I'm like, this is really good. It's probably a Jennifer's Body, because I think it's aged very well with the performances in there as well. Juno, I think looking back on, I think Juno's a very strange film. I think Juno released now would be like, oh,
Mm.
interesting. But I think that's why Jennifer's Body has aged so well, because I think it hits on the abstract of the whole situation, like the hot cheerleader becoming like this devil creature. There's like an interesting parallel, but I think it comes really well all around. Whereas Tully and this, I just think there's like this trying to further elevate really good material, and I just don't know why there's like an extra step forward. Who is making these decisions? If it's Cody in the screenplay, or it's the director, or whoever the creative team is. It feels like, oh, we've got something really good here, but let's go, let's just go like fucking take the intersection. Let's just take the junction off. Like no, let's head to the destination. But they always feel it seems to be this third act narrative or thematic, like, oh, we'll get them here, I just think it comes at a really great cost. Again, though, like you said, I still quite like this. It's not. It seems like I'm being overtly negative, but I just think there's something really, really good here that could have been a generational great. Like you said, a 4.5, a 5 star. But because of the creative decisions it makes and the lack of conviction, or just the lack of clarity, it just falls into the mundane, which I think is just really more disappointing than anything than being cruel to this or just disingenuous to it or anything. It just falls into a bracket of being like, you know, could have been, but you know, discourse is discourse.
Have any of you guys seen Young Adult? Because that hasn't been mentioned at all.
Yeah,
No, no, it's
And
on my list to see.
I really like Young Adult.
I liked Young Adult a lot, even, and it is written by Diablo Cody. And there are some similarities to this in that it really focuses on. I think the difference, just to get this out of the way, is that it follows a really unpleasant, unlikable character who doesn't change that much from beginning to end. Lisa Frankenstein, there is more of an arc, and yeah, I think in my mind, it's very much like this is what happens when someone isn't allowed to deal with something, and the way she starts thinking about her eliminating her problems is eliminating people, you know, and getting what she needs from something else. But yeah, I would recommend seeing Young Adult as far as like I think that the quality is better than Tully. And I have to admit, I saw Juno in the theater when it came out with my family, and we all went home and we were like, what the hell was that? We did not like it. And we were in the minority for years. It was such an adored film. And it is really interesting that years later, people are like, that film was weird. I didn't like that. And it's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, no,
All,
Lisa
go on,
Frankenstein is
Mitch.
just very unfocused for me compared to the other films that she has written, and I think it does boil down to direction, knowing what to actually focus on, knowing what to keep, what to remove. Um, where it's where everything feels telegraphed, but also it takes so long to get to some points. Like I really like the dynamic between Lisa and the creature, but it takes so long to get to the actual romance, where it's like the little gestures that he's making, but like we don't focus enough on that to truly make it work fully, and that applies to every single other narrative strand in here. That's like the best way that I can encapsulate the entire film is that on a moment to moment basis, it's very enjoyable. It's very entertaining. It's also a very short film. I want to say it's like 90 minutes before the credits start. It's a long, long, long end credits. Um, but yeah, like thinking about it, which also I always want to be more generous with films, and I think like if in the moment you're not really focusing on certain parts or thinking about certain things, it means it's working, it's working its magic. And this one does work its magic ultimately. Like, it is very pleasant film, very fun. But yeah, I do just wish it had more staying power. Especially like hearing you, Hillary, talking about all of the like the symbolism of it, which I felt during the movie. It didn't land. Like I wish it gave me more emotions.
Mhm.
I only felt emotional more towards the end, but also because like everything that has to do with like suicidal intentions always gets to me very
Yes,
strongly.
exactly.
But just I don't know about the ending where I don't know. Like I especially taking it into the grander context of the story of Frankenstein and what Mary Shelley wrote and the previous adaptations of her work and how that ties into this film. Um, it's very again very uneven, very uneven. Um, I think it would have been more poignant and more powerful and impactful if it ended on her grave. you know. But they want to have the cutesy little addendum before the credits. Well, she's actually alive. He brought her back to life somehow and is nurturing her back. I guess he's gonna kill more people to give her body parts to make her whole again. I don't know,
Probably,
but
yes.
probably yeah. Like it's very cute. It's very cute for a movie that wants to be excessively cute, in my opinion, for what the content is. Either it should have been way more like a proper young adult film, and you make it much nicer, much simpler, much cleaner, or you embrace, which is probably what they had intentioned originally. I don't know if just having more blood would save this film for me, in a way that makes me really, really like it. I don't think so. But yeah, I think they should have embraced, similarly to Jennifer's Body, they should have embraced the horror aspect more to have more fun with it. The possibilities were endless, I think, in
I'm
that
gonna,
sense.
yeah.
And yeah, everything is just it's just a lot of very simple sets with very colorful lighting that has very little texture to it. It all
Oh,
feels like
I
it's shot in
that's
a
so strange.
studio.
Can I interject here? I really
Sure.
hate. I hate, and I get in trouble with this sometimes in my. I hate the fetishization of the '80s. I hate it so
Hmm.
much. And the thing is that a lot of people don't realize this. It started in the fucking '90s. Like already, like remember that decade? Oh, it was so cool. Let's have '80s fashion in this movie or '80s stuff in that. And the '80s were actually like a really hellish time if you really look, especially like in America. Just really, really
Oh
awful
yeah.
things were happening. But for some reason in this film, I have to give the production designers credit for doing their work because a lot of that stuff when I was growing up was still around, and there are objects in the fucking frame that I can identify where I'm like, my parents had that, or just even like the floral patterns on pillows and stuff like that. It's just like someone had that. I saw that at someone's house. It really, really was crazy how period accurate it was, while also being heightened. And it didn't irritate me. And the same with the hair and makeup. I had a sixth grade
Hmm.
teacher who like had the electric pinkish purple eyeliner that Lisa wears at the beginning of the film and like had the same hair. And I was like, oh, it's so period accurate to the point where it's like nails on a chalkboard. But I have to give it credit for that. So visually, I think all the aspects of the film visually actually did it for me. I thought the opening credit sequence was great with the economy of story, just explaining like where this man came from or boy, where this the creature comes from, and the dream sequences. I have to point out that this is the second film that has really heavy-handed visual references to A Trip to the Moon, as well as I saw the TV Glow. Um, Total coincidence, I'm sure, but it was interesting to see that reference in that film in a really spooky way, and here in a very kind of whimsical, um, sweet, romantic way. And the moon is always kind of there. Um, but yeah, as far as like visually, I felt like I had to go to bat for that, where it's like that usually doesn't do it for me. It really irritates me. And instead it was like it was heightened enough but accurate enough where like everything was funny. Like they'd be in a scene and there'd just be something there. And I'd like the shoe phone, that is real. He has the shoe phone. It's like, that's an actual thing. And the exercise equipment in the background, like my mom had that. She used to do step aerobics in our basement. Like there's just little things like that that I can't say like it was cutesy enough to like capture my heart or make me nostalgic, or it's just like, oh, I like the film because it's referencing my childhood. It just made everything way, way funnier to me. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
I just want to add something to this Diablo Cody conversation, which I've sort of started myself, so I might as well finish it. But um, I also think that there's this again. This could have come across quite patronising. I don't mean it like this. You know, it's interesting that a writer, when they write from their perspective and what they take from their career and what they take from their own life and how they project that into the writing. I think it's interesting that we've done a lot of Paul Schrader on Uncut Gems, and Carson like a massive advocate for him. I think Paul Schrader's one where Schrader can write screenplays, but there's also incredibly strong lineages throughout all of them, which are very personal to him. I think the abstract's always really interesting, but the personal aspect of it is always very much apparent. And I think you can probably say that, you know, he's probably said enough with Taxi Driver than he has with First Reformed, and then everything sprinkled throughout there as well. You've got so much depth. Not you can probably say nothing really changes, but the social parameters have. Yet his own perspectives on stuff really haven't, which is interesting because when you look at Diablo Coda, the two films that she's very much infamous for, with Juno and Jennifer's Body, you know that they're almost 15 years old now, and I think Diablo Cody's never sort of done anything else. Granted, I think she's a screenwriter like second, third career, um, highly popular, but Juno and Jennifer's Body are an era that is very much not here anymore. Just like Heather's, they all might be very social relevant, but that writing at that time, we're not here for that now. I think as someone grows old as a writer, I think that comes into it. I think that's why Tully was such a disappointment for me, because as a writer at that time in her lifespan, that's such a fucking interesting perspective to have. Sort of turned on its head by Jason Reitman, which his career speaks for itself. And then, it'd be interesting to look at young adult and see where she's at that time. I think that's so fascinating. But when you see this, everything else feels like a progression. Juno is making perhaps mistakes at a very young age, or being told other things when you should be following yourself and being told what to do, and that the issues there. Jennifer's Body's one about finding yourself, sexuality, fluidity, finding your personal perspective. Then you get into other things, and you get like Tully getting to the point where being drowned in a family, having children, and the issues of that takes a toll on someone. Young adult comes in there as well, like understanding of like perhaps that when you get older you have that retrospective understanding of like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be an arsewipe. Like maybe I should have a bit more maturity now. Maybe I should start taking stock of stuff. I find it interesting that after, and I'm not trying to. This is not like a female thing at all. I think it's an interesting writer perspective, regardless if it was male or female perspective. But I think having a projection that feels like it's evolving. Lisa Frankenstein's interesting that it goes back, um, like to like from not a contemporary time, but back to when she was like writing about maybe at high school or stuff like that. And I think it's really interesting when it's almost like watching a writer or a director try and emulate where they were at a certain point in their time span. I always find it really interesting as a thought experiment, because I think a lot of it feels like they're trying to write to match a perspective and not actually like writing it at the time frame when it was released. And I feel like you can always feel that there's a difference there. I think that you can feel that when you watch Schrader and when you look at something like the Card Counter, I think or even First Reformed, you're watching a man deal with these issues of race and religion, because his perspective of how he's been brought up in his society that he was brought up in. But it doesn't feel like it's chasing it. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm going to go back and like write about Travis Bickle. Whereas this is, I'm going to write about what it was like in 1989 as a high schooler. I just think there's also an issue there where it just feels like a writer is trying to emulate a time frame. I hope this is making sense to people. I hope I'm not just like absolutely just spouting shit here, but I just think you can definitely tell that it's a writer trying to emulate a time in their lives that's just gone now. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I just think it takes a lot more creative endeavor, and I think it's quite clear that where Diablo Cody writes the strongest is that when the perspective is in the present. I think that's where she's really powerful as a writer. And obviously, her perspective is like being a stripper and documenting stuff like that. I think that's where like her prowess comes as a writer as well. But this one is like retrospectively looking back, and I just don't think it's a very strong suit. I hope that makes sense. I know it's a bit of a waffle there, but yeah.
Hey, you at least got me on your side because you compared it to Schrader. So, like, I
Well,
guess
that's
if we're gonna compare Lisa Frankenstein to First
Yeah.
Reformed, I guess
I've
I
got
have
to
to
try
go
and
with First
manipulate
Reformed is
someone.
better. But
Well, yeah, those are two very, very different films.
Well, yeah, but I think that it's the tonal lineage of the writer, is that it just doesn't feel like Schrader's trying to like, I need to do Travis Bickle too. Like it's a man who's still dealing with moral issues or social issues, but trying to be a better person and understanding that the guilt and the weight follows him. But I just think that regardless of the film, I just think it's interesting that the writer is with that film. It feels conscious that it's First Reformed, whereas Diablo Cody in this, it feels like, oh, I'm going to try write a film that was similar to Jennifer's Body, rather than just writing a feature that's not trying to emulate something else. Like if this was not set in 1989 and it was set now, I think it would still suffer from the same issues. It would probably be better because you'd probably have more audience. You'd have a larger, vast amount of audience that could probably engage with the material a bit more because it doesn't feel like a throwback. But in the same time, you lose the campiness. So it's an interesting one. I think everything that goes for it ultimately goes against it. But to my point, I just think it feels like a feature that's trying to go back to something. A strange.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of like a comparison, but it's all to do with like other. It's the only way I can describe it is like silly. Is that it's like when Shane Black did the Predators or the Predator, and it's like trying to emulate something he did in 1987. Let it go. I just think it feels like a person is trying to relight the same match that's burnt out. Just like it's okay to like write a film and be a 45-year-old writing that. You don't have to try and be like, oh, what it was like. It's like that Simpsons like meme, like hey, you're like, oh, the Steve Buscemi. What's happening, young kids? Like hip, like trying to be more fun. And I think the weakness of this is if it was set in contemporary, I think it'd be vastly more obvious. But because it's in the 1989, there's sort of like this. Also, it's because Zelda Williams directs as well. It's a bit different. I'm waffling now, but I think I'm just trying to get my point across. That's all.
You made your point really clearly, and then we got lost in The Simpsons. We got lost in Predator.
It is a good
valid, but we lost track there. I was going to bring up, there's also a difference if we're comparing this to First Reform. Just like the vision is that we do have another voice here as director. This is not like Diablo Cody is creating this world and the execution of it. And I think also it's weird that people overlook like Zelda Williams as a creative voice here. Making her directorial debut, everyone's like, Diablo Cody. I'm sure Zelda also has a hand here, and I think that should be mentioned and respected and talked about as being quite interesting. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you say. Let me be clear. I don't think there's anyone who like hates this current, like everything is going to be set in the 80s and 70s because of Stranger Things, and isn't it so funny more than me? Like, I never want another film to be set in the fucking 1980s and to do that thing again.
Here,
like the VHS franchise, holy shit, dude, we lost the train, guys. It's no longer funny, no longer interesting. It's now like just super lazy. Does it allow her to murder people more easily? Sure, we don't really have to worry about security cameras or anything. I don't know. It allows for. I don't think that's a point that either like is a pro or negative for me really on the film. Like you could do interesting visual designs and colors and stuff in the modern world, right? You can create a heightened sense of reality in any time period. I don't know. I guess that didn't really bother me either way, but alas.
I'll tell you what I'll bring up here, right? And it's the issue I had with the Watchers, and it's something that I've been thinking about the two films because it's weird how when I watched this months ago, obviously with Shining Sun hadn't come out yet, and then having watched that and watching the state of the two features, there's just sort of this common thing I wanted to talk about. And it's been with me the last few days. I don't know if these are the issue with two directorial debuts, but I find that the two films suffer from the same thing in that I think that the two features are first time directors, but they very much have an industry backing. Like they've obviously been around cameras, they've been around productions. Both the daughters of two extremely infamous, famous actor and director, obviously Robin Williams and M. Night Shyamalan. But it's interesting that the two of them as directorial debuts, I personally found to have no visual voice. Now, granted, they both have iconography and they both have a surface level visual prowess, right? However, I don't think that these two, and I think it's partly because it's a debut, but the issue again, going back to other things they've made, is that I hope I'm trying to explain this right because I've been trying to brain fart this for like 2 days, but I have this issue where they just don't scream personality. They don't scream like what's yet to come. And granted, it's only debut, so I'm talking very early here. But in both features, I find visually they're quite bland. There's no visual risks. There's no visual identity. There's nothing here in both features to sort of take away or even find it impactful. and specifically on iconography, but technical camera work here. Now the issue is, and it's sort of more like a personal problem, is that with the way that cinema is now, is that everything's so saturated that what these two then have to lean on is narrative. And to me, they're both like 60%, 70% could have been something else, but don't take that next step. And it's interesting that both of them have come out this year. Both of them haven't done particularly well, but both of them will have a cult following because the debuts and will grow and evolve. But the problem is that if this was in a tighter landscape, or if there was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, they both had cinematic releases. It's hard to sort of think of like, well, who gravitates towards these two things if they didn't have that last name? Who gravitates to these two things if they don't have a form of like, oh, the Shyamalan thing or the Williams thing? Not that Zelda Williams sort of is in that ballpark, but that you've got to admit there's something there. I just think that once you take those out of it and you look at the films, where's the personality of these two directors? And I don't see them on the screen. And what worries me,
I have to disagree. I think that Zelda Williams does have a personality, and
I think it's a lot hidden behind the 1980s, though. I think it's a lot hidden behind what you said about formulating like previous things because it's set in the 80s because there's no phones here, we can get away with more wacky things.
It could be that, but I think considering that this is her feature debut and what she's taking on for her first time, she exceeded my expectations. I mean, I can't even say for myself, like if you threw me into that situation and had me direct something like that out there, I don't think I would have done as good of a job as she did. So I mean, I'm gonna have to depart with you on that one. I don't think it's like that.
She ties in the cinema stuff. I think how she treats the creature is probably the most impressive bit of personality there. I mean, I don't think it's spectacular. I think it's certainly more than The Watchers. Go listen to our full review of that. We really get into it. But like, I wouldn't say like. But also it's difficult to know what is her personality when you have one feature, right? Because like it's hard to create that narrative. So like it's kind of all speculatory. Like, yes, I think the aesthetic does a lot. Yes, I think that the violence tied to this does a lot. I think the colors do a lot. But like there are pieces here where what is she going to leave? What is she going to take away from this? Especially when she departs from Diablo Cody, fingers crossed. I think that it will be an interesting journey. I just don't know if we know yet.
Yeah.
In a world of saturated releases where these two will undoubtedly find a home on the streaming services, I just find that they don't have a visualization where they find something to be engaging, and because of that, they have to rest on narratives. I think that this is far more interesting than The Watchers, because the Watchers to me is a very much one note on that regard, whereas this has got something about it. But I just think that the next step of both of them, I just hope there's sort of like there's just no technical ability, and I don't really know Hillary that much, but this might be sort of out of character, but I really disagree about you saying that, Hillary, because I think if you had a lighting department on a cinema, I think you've got a visionary eye, or you would at least have an eye of like, I like this lit here. I think there's also like she's not going into this blind whatsoever. She has a lighting department. She has key grips. There's also a team here that's going to be comfortable. She's working on a studio backing at least. I think she's not being put into the wild too much, and I think that I still think there's absolutely no reason of why there's just no technical ability here. I think some camera work is interesting, but I just think they very much lack a visual identity. And I think as newcomers, I find it surprisingly shocking that, let's say if these are debuts, and granted these two are in very different positions because they've got the sort of they're embedded into the Hollywood status in a way, which is unfair to them, but it's true. But if you were going to make a debut film, you throw everything into that. You show everybody what you're capable of behind the camera. And I find that these two films are surprisingly lacking, as if it's like, well, we'll get another one. We'll get another one. I feel like there's a weird confidence level, or maybe there's like this attitude of like, well, we can try something next time. But it's interesting that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to do in the next time, and I think that a debut. Maybe this is like some very much an old-fashioned thing of me, but I always found like a debut should like absolutely just pick you up by the scruff of the neck. Like, as much as I don't like Tarantino, Reservoir Dogs is like even Clerks. Clerks on a credit card. I'm never going to make something again. It's shot in black and white. It's distinctive. There's a visualization there because there might never be a chance again. Reservoir Dogs. It's so interesting to watch visually. There's a tone there. There's a texture. These two features don't feel like I only have one shot here. I need to make the most. And I don't want to sound that disparaging because obviously the comparison is other people. But when I look at this, I'm like, like look. I don't want to bring it up because I'm going to mention it a little later. But Saint Maud, like that fires every fucking thing at that cinema screen. It makes it visual. It makes it disgusting. It makes everything feel unnerving. Like and granted, it's a different thematic, but there's a perspective there of just throwing everything into it, not knowing you're going to get another shot. Like Shallow Grave. Every debut you can think about, they have a singular type of attraction because they feel unique. These two films' perspectives, I don't find the watchers to be a director who's made a debut. It feels like a fourth film that someone's tired. I think this is a film that doesn't suffer from that at all because I still think this has got like a really interesting energy. But I think it's one of those features where I would love a sequence here to like dazzle me. Because also I've got to bear in mind, like they're not going to be shown to friends. Like they're shown at cinemas. These were in auditoriums for hundreds of people, and it should be a calling card. And there's very much little here. I look at them like Zelda Williams is telling me like I need to be back for round 2 here. There's something there to these two features. I just feel like I don't feel like indebted to be like I can't wait to see what she does next. I'll just watch it.
I have to.
I get that to a point. I will say, like, number one, both films are tied. Not only like this Diablo Cody, obviously Watchers is tied to the Shyamalan gimmick, and it's like it goes off the fucking rails. Again, check the episode. Obviously, I wish every director, like you just watched Mondo Trash Show. I wish every director had on their like the drive of a John Waters to be unique and special and deliver something, right? Like, but also I think in the context of cinema and modern cinema, like, you get way, way, way worse and more boring options than Lisa Frankenstein.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
thank you.
I do want to keep in mind like that, but like, yes, in a perfect world, everyone's going to have a John Waters heart, or I mean, any of our directors we've talked about over the last year and a half, right? There's hundreds, if not thousands, of like, wow, that was such an inspired directorial debut, and that's why they're one of the greatest voices in the history of cinema. A little, like, I think Zelda Williams does a perfectly fine job, not to where I'm like, oh, she's gonna be the greatest voice in cinema. But I think this is fine. I don't know. Like, I also like love that we're at the era where now we're like, we could make better films, which I don't think anyone here but Nick can say officially, because Nick, I do think.
Yeah, I have a confession to make. Just
Nick, I beg you.
No, this is just a brief observation, and this is in reply to Jack. I have a confession to make. I did go to film school, but the only place that I really failed was cinematography. Like, if my cinematography teacher was here, like, he'd be on the floor laughing and laughing, because that's the place where I failed. I can't light, I can't film, I can't, for some reason, like, I was cursed. Although in my defense, they were giving me cameras that were used during the Korean War, that had to be wound up and stuff. And the cameras were all broken and had stuff stuck in the gate.
Oh, no.
But yeah, I failed that class like so hard. So undoubtedly she would have outshone me either way.
Not
but yes, Nicolò.
Not to argue with you again, Carson, but see, I agree with you about, like, you can't have 9 out of 10 times of a film being outstanding. But I think in the last few years, because the market's so saturated, if you don't have that voice, like I'm just going to name a few films here, right? And these are debuts, and some of them are men, some of them are female, but these have stood out. After Sun by Charlotte Wells. You've got Lamb by Vladimir Johansson. You've got Pleasure by Nina Thyberg. Right? There's so much shit here. Like Emma Seligman was Shiva Baby, or Stephen Karen with the Humans, was reading off. This is on Mubi's site, right? They're all distinctive to the voice that they're being projected from. They're all visually distinctive. They're all thematically distinctive, and none of them there are the same film. And I think if you put Lisa Frankenstein in there, or The Watchers, and those films are vastly down on budget. Granted, I think Lisa Frankenstein's only 13 million, which is I think it runs really well for 13 million. I just don't think these films have a strong enough voice to be like, oh, let's just in a very brutal world, if they were if this was like, oh, if it came out on video, I think Lisa Frankenstein would do well over time because it's a cult classic. But I just don't think that you go to the video store and you choose these two. I think it's streaming now and the same principle. I just
I
don't know
think it
who.
depends on what you're looking for. Because I mean, you're talking about Mubi; those are totally different. Those are films that are going for something completely different. This is like a popcorn film.
That's just the perspective of a list of like just debuts of exciting voices. But I granted, like you could probably name some other people, but I'm trying to like mainstream things that have been released, like not just at DTV and stuff like that, but.
To be clear, we also have on the list Boy Kills World, 80 for Brady. And I would recommend you check out the ClapperCast episodes for all the ones you mentioned, Jack, because we covered all of those on the podcast over the last few years. But like, again, I think it's unfair to mention like the best directorial debut.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's like those are very different.
I'm sure this is better than Boy Kills World. I've not seen Boy Kills World.
Same.
I assume.
Yeah.
There is an obsession with having the perfect debut, which absolutely destroys so many filmmakers' will to actually make a first feature because everything is held up against the great ones, the ones that push through. I will say from my viewpoint, even though I don't necessarily like the direction of Lisa Frankenstein, I think it's the weakest part of it. There is style there is a presence, in my opinion. There is clearly someone who thought of these things, and in my mind it's someone who cares more about the characters and the actors and the themes of the film rather than the visuals, rather than the best way to actually bring those things to life, which isn't necessarily bad. And like honestly, speaking of directors, like you mentioned Kevin Smith, I wouldn't use him as a visual, as an example of a good visual filmmaker. The guy didn't know how to use lenses up until he was like 50 years old. So I think there is. What? Sorry.
That's all well and good, but the aesthetic of Clerks is still distinctive.
He made it because it was the cheapest option to make it black and white. He didn't even think about that. That's the only reason he saved his ass because it was black and white.
Well, it's memorable, but not for its aesthetics. I think it's more the way that he writes. So I am in Nicholas camp on that one.
Yeah, but I know I appreciate that, but I think the point I'm trying to make is that there is still.
I was trying to make a point. 1 second. No, I just wanted to say,
the point being argued. What is this conversation?
She has a style. I think she
we're
has
all
a
on the
style.
same page, pretty much.
I don't think so. I think that I ended up liking this more than you guys.
It. Give her time. Just give her time. That's all I want to say.
Without
getting lost into every single feature debut ever made.
When you make your feature-length debut, right, you will not leave a single ounce of blood, sweat, and tears, right, back in Italy. You will make every single decision on that feature. You will make it flamboyant. You will make it the iconography personal to you. You will throw everything into that because you may not get a second chance, and that might be from your perspective of your background that you're different to these two people in question. But I just find that when the limitation is there, when you know there may not be a second opportunity, I think there's such a much more identifiable consistency of let's just impress people. Let's just throw everything I've got here. And I think, granted, I agree that if you live on those, if you live on that component of oh shit, I have to live up to that, you'll never do it. But I also think that if you're going to be a filmmaker, people who are born to be filmmakers like yourself, right, have got a visual cue. And I think that when you look at these films, I think it's such a saturated market now. I don't see where these films live in a perspective of like, if this came out on streaming, it would die. This for multiple reasons, but Also because they don't have a visual identity, they don't have an energy. There's no calling card to them. And I think if people perspective of getting people back into a cinema screen to watch the next Zelda Williams feature, you have to have a calling card now. You have to have something that's going to get people back. Otherwise, if Ashana's last name was not Shyamalan, you would not go watch a follow up. You just wouldn't. If it was Zelda, I don't know.
I think a lot of people didn't even know that she was Robin Williams' daughter. Although, like, I mean, the name was featured in the trailer. I thought so many people don't know that that's her. In fact, like the first time I kind of forgot, I was like, "Oh yeah, Zelda Williams. It seems a little familiar," and it came back.
I'm also
no one
glad
talks
about
about Zelda with this film. Is that just my experience? Like, I feel like we're the first people to mention this as a Zelda Williams film. I feel like everyone talks about this from the context of being a Diablo Cody film. That's the conversation I hear. You know, whether or not
it
that's
would be the same
worthwhile, I hear
thing.
nothing
Yeah, it would be the same thing
about
if,
Zelda.
I don't know, like Schrader wrote a film that's directed by a first-time filmmaker. It would be considered a Paul Schrader film because it's the name, it fits with previous
I don't think that's true.
features like
He's
we
written a
talked
bunch of
about.
films like recently, and no one fucking ever mentions them as being a Paul Schrader film. I don't know. I just think I don't know. Like, I also think this film, like, I don't know, what is this film trying to be? This film is like a studio effort to, like, with Cole Sprouse to get teenagers in the audience. Like, this is not trying to be like some
And it
independent.
failed.
This
No,
is gonna be
this is
like this
fun.
independent Nicolò Grasso film. Like, if Nick, you got hired by Universal Pictures or Universal Studios or whoever, Paramount, whoever, a big studio to make like a crowd pleasing teenager film, I would not hold you to the same standards as if you got hired by Mubi to make a small independent, this is your passion project. Like, those are two different projects, also just in identity. So I think it's also like,
Yeah.
again, we are doing this podcast. We are breaking this down in like this very critical analytical lens, which I think is great. And I think films should hold up to that. But also, like, this film is not meant to be talked about in this way. This film is meant to be something for teenagers to go have a good time with. Do I think, looking back in February, this is probably the most entertaining, most visually interesting feature there? Absolutely. This is better than Drive Away Dolls were. This was better than what Ghostbusters Frozen Empire was the name. Like, this is like, in the context of what cinema is, this is better than Mean Girls 2024. This is better than The Beekeeper was the week before. Like, look
Oh
at what is
yeah.
coming out around it. I think we, like, yes, this is not what I expect Nicolò Grasso's debut feature to be, which we will be celebrating on the podcast when we go see it all at Cannes. But
You're putting so
that's not
much
like a
pressure on the
bad
guy.
thing.
No pressure.
Well, you have to make the perfect debut, Hillary. That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, actually, that's the one thing. What Jack is saying is true. This is just an aside, is that you can put all your blood, sweat, and tears and die, and it'll still fall flat. It still fails, and people will not see it. That's the story we don't hear. So, I mean, it's not, passion isn't enough. There has to be a lot of talent, a lot of luck too. But yeah, I mean, if Nicolò released a feature film and it wasn't, God forbid, like, it wasn't received as warmly as we wanted to, it's just like, well, you learn from it, and then you pick up a camera and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. That's what it comes down to.
I have such a clear vision of Jack going on the podcast and being like, actually, it was shit, and this is what he should have done.
Oh God,
like an hour straight.
No, I'm his biggest supporter. I've been there from day one. I just think that I think you're right. It's an interest, but from what you've just said there, Carson, about like the film, I think I get. We just go back to like, I don't think this is for people. Like, this is the issue. I think it's sold as one film. It's sold as like a Sprouse brother, Kathy Newton. Like, oh, we can get a certain target audience here. That's fair enough. I don't think that's the intended audience. It's two different things. There's a target audience and an intended audience. Your target audience is a vast predicament of 15 to 25-year-olds. It's a massive, large audience. But your intended audience is the people who want to go there and get it. So you want bums on seats, but you want people to leave and be like, I get that. That's the word of mouth you want writing for The Guardian. That's the word of mouth you write one in for Total Film, whoever, Clapper. Those are the type of people you want to engage with the material. So for me, it puts far too much emphasis on the target audience, not the intended audience, and that to me is an indictment of the system in itself. And that, you're not going to engage on the basis level because it's just so surface. If you wanted to just cut a bit deeper, I think you'd get both of them. But I just can't see like 15 to 25-year-olds rocking up to watch Lisa Frankenstein. It's
Oh,
got
it's
no.
happened. I could say that. I've found fan communities that have already sprung up of people making art and writing stories that absolutely love this film. And my sense is that they're younger. I don't know if they're 15 to 25. This is all online, so I don't know who they are.
On
But
what site?
on what sites? Social media, like people like Reddit or Tumblr, or just do a Google image search. Look up Lisa Frankenstein art. It exists.
To be fair, there's artwork and stands for literally every piece of art that's ever been made. So like,
That's surprising.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like the artwork for the beekeeper, right? Like I don't think that says
As there
much
should
about
be.
the film either way. But don't start.
Need to go look it up now.
Maybe the last thing, moving on from this conversation, because I feel like we've made our points clear. So whichever side of the battlefield you're on, this is Uncut Gems. We're not doing this for 5 hours. But I would like to talk about this in context of being a Frankenstein narrative. Again, we're looking through these Universal Monster remakes. We're kind of in like a Frankenstein era. We had Birth, Rebirth. I don't know if anyone watched that, but it's a fantastic directorial debut that takes the Frankenstein narrative. But we have Del Toro's Frankenstein. We have multiple Frankenstein projects coming out next year. Like, it's a very busy time for my favorite Universal monster. And I'm curious how you guys think this plays into using the Frankenstein mythos and narrative. Specifically, if Nick or Hillary, I don't know if you have any thoughts, I would love to hear.
Nick has spoken the least, so I'm going to let him go first. But I have thoughts as well.
Bless you, thank you. No, I don't mind. I really like the opening sequence. You actually didn't mention that, which is this animated gothic short, basically, that shows us the life of Frankenstein. This man then dies and gets reborn as the creature. I think it's very cute. Everything that they do with kind of like the idea of Frankenstein with using what's like a tanning bed, is that the name, right?
Yeah.
For instead of the gigantic machine to kind of like bring back to life all of his appendages, um, and the creature itself, like we mentioned, the performance, he just does a very good job. When so many of the other, who was it? Was it like Aaron Eckhart who played the
Yeah.
creature in like 2014 or something? Or like this super buff dude in an action movie.
I
It's so
Frankenstein. Let's
I Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yes,
Underworld spin-off. Come on.
Jesus. It's so nice to actually have like a proper creature that's undead, and they play around a lot with the fact that he's undead. I like that. I just think it almost feels like it's more of just a name reference more than anything else. I kind of wish there were a bit more connections to the actual story of Mary Shelley, especially with the ending, which like goes back to my problems with the ending. That like they end with this very cute note, while the image of the creator dying and there's the creature and and the pitchforks and stuff. It all feels so low key. It all feels so tight. I don't know if it's a problem with budget or if it's a problem with just ambition, honestly. But imagine the same movie where you actually feel the pressure of the police closing in and the people turning on Lisa, and there's the creature and they're like running away, and you actually have an exciting climax or anything like that. I think that's the power and the tragedy of Frankenstein the novel, and I think that's slightly lacking here in that element. But I don't know how Hillary feels. I'm curious.
No, you bring up a good point. There could have been, like you said, this is a low stakes film, and I think that regarding the ending and how it could have reflected Frankenstein more, yeah, it does. There could have been a lot more done. But going to Cole Sprouse, I mean, just the fact that it's a very physical performance and it's silent. So I did write down notes where it's like, yeah, this is going back to like Boris Karloff or Lon Chaney, who perfectly fit into this discussion because we are referencing, these older films that introduced these creatures to cinema audiences. And even other actors like David Prowse playing Darth Vader, or Doug Jones, who's played tons of different uncanny figures in films. The fact that he was able to pull that off with no dialogue until maybe like the last 30 seconds of the film impressed me a lot. But at the same time, I kept in mind, like, this guy is a veteran. He's been doing things since he was like 6 or 7 years old, maybe younger. So I was impressed with his performance physically, that he was able to communicate so much. You know that he's in love with her without him saying anything. And part of the comedy from it is that she doesn't see that. I just found that so hilarious that it's like, it's obvious this guy's into you. He just made you come with a vibrator and you're talking about losing your virginity to somebody else. Like, I could not get over that. I thought it was really silly.
I can go because I'm going to upset a few people, as if I hadn't done it already. I find it the weakest aspect of this feature, and again, for a feature that has a surprisingly like absorbent amount of elements to actually say and stay, it's once again a ripple of this feature that just doesn't have anything to do with anything at bar surface for me. I think it's just like feels like a weird consequence of events, not that doesn't feel like integral to me. I think it's a very thin layer of the feature. I think it's a very thin aspect of the feature overall. I think its marketing was like, it wasn't even meant to be called this. I think it was meant to be called Lisa Frank or something. Then they put it Lisa Frankenstein. Um, like to me, I just think it's like a very thin layer of like that the creature mythos. Um, the actual creature, the style and the aspect of the production, I think it's very interesting. Like Hillary said about like how it correlates to issues with Lisa's life as well, and how that's sort of like crafting himself to be a better person to look after. Lisa, I think it's a really interesting dynamic. I think that the design's really cool. The fact that it doesn't speak in it's fun. Um, but it gets his voice towards the end. I think after everything, they come together. It's always really nice. I think there's an interesting iconography. Never great, never good, just plain good iconography. But it's just one of a secondary aspect to it. I'm like, there's an idea here, but there's very little else to say. That, oh yeah, there's a line, like Frankenstein's monster, and then this. That's it. And I think it's very much a sign of the feature in general. So I'm sort of accepting the fact of it, or I am accepting of it, should I say? Because that's ultimately how I view the feature. I'm like, oh, okay, and that's just nothing else to thought more for me here. I think there's a lot better parallels in other works, but granted, if this could choose of what it wants to actually do, I think it'd be a bit more boisterous in it, or have a bit more fun. Like I said, there's lots of fun here with the creature, and to begin with, there's a lot of fun here about the mythos as well. But I just think it needs to either be one or the other. But that being said, I do think it's interesting. I just don't think it's interesting enough.
Yeah, I'll say, like, I'm very obviously in love with the Frankenstein narrative. I love the original. I've been quite critical about the upcoming ones as far as certain perspectives. Obviously, like the queer perspective is baked into this, and I think I'm very like protective in some ways of like just straight people coming in and making a Frankenstein movie because like history, you're ignoring it, whatever. It didn't bother me here. I'll be honest. Like, I think that number one, I like the fact that this is doing something very different, very unique with it as far as taking this overall gimmick of a character. And I think, like Nick kind of said with the adaptations to it, I think it works well. And just overall, this movie has like a love for Universal monsters in a way that I find very endearing. Behind her wall on her bed, she has all the different, like Dracula eyes is like the most clear. Then she has the creature and all of them. We've talked to, until our voices ran dry, of how the universal monsters mean for people who find themselves on the outskirts of society, what they can represent in that way. This character who's going through trauma, who is isolated and alone due to her trauma, for feeling like she doesn't belong and she doesn't have a meaning in life connected to that. Her finding solace and finding strength in cinema in general, but especially the universal monsters, I found that to be quite endearing. So it didn't really bother me. I also think like there is a certain queerness or certain campiness here to where it's not just like a straight man making this, so maybe I appreciate that more. But for a creature, for a universal monster, I'm quite personal with. I'll say it worked really well for me. So let's go around. Let's say, any last thoughts? Is there anything left in Lisa Frankenstein to squeeze out in this conversation? And maybe just giving it to final opinions. Nick, if you want to go first, I would love to hear them.
I can go to final opinions. I think yeah, the more like talking about it, it has kind of solidified that I'm glad I watched the film. It was a ton of fun in the moment, but again, it really sadly didn't give me much outside of just standard entertainment. I think there is promise here. I think there was promise in the script. I think there is promise in Zelda Williams as a director for future projects. I think she can definitely grow, especially visually. But it was cute. It was just like a cute film. Nothing more, nothing less. Definitely, compared to so many other soulless films that came out this year, even something honestly, like speaking of Catherine Newton, even something like Abigail, I preferred this over Abigail, even though that one should be more up my alley. This one was just way more just playing fun, just plain fun, despite all of the negatives, because we got lost. I got lost in talking about so many negatives. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Flawed, heavily flawed, but still enjoyable. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. That you're just having fun in the moment.
Jack?
I appreciate this for what it is. I think it hasn't grown on me. I think the fact we've had a big conversation about it has sort of made me a bit more uh, heavy-footed on the whole arrangement of it. I do enjoy it. I find it engaging. I find it entertaining. But I think the one thing I feel like maybe I'm a bit too more analytical for my own good. But I just see something here where I'm like, just a few bits of molding it here, molding it there, adding a bit of this, taking away from that. I think you have a really interesting social dynamic of a feature. Even just a social discourse, social commentary, fun entertainment. I think it's all there. I just think the final product or the final vision is just very much lacking. And my final thoughts a bit about this is that this should have been made in 1989. This should have been made by Tim Burton. This should have been made at the time with to really get on the video wave. It'd be a cult classic now. We'd be talking about it as this fucking brilliant feature, far ahead of its time. It should have come opposite Beetlejuice. It should have been in that summer. I think saying it in 1989 to me now is absolutely pointless. Aside from like getting a time frame of being like, oh, quirky, cool, you remember this. It's just enough to remember it being reality, but it's just far enough away to be something that's not relevant anymore. Within certain like social parameters and the era of the time, I think it just about gets away with it. But there's just a lot of creative decisions here. I just second guess. There's a lot here where I'm like, maybe the next two or three films from Zelda Williams would be a bit more refined. That being said, I think in a world now where very little features have the opportunity of feature filmmakers have the opportunity to express themselves two or three times, you have to sort of hit the ball running. I just don't think this feature really does elevate Zelda Williams' personality. I think he gets overshadowed with a writer that is trying to emulate an era that's bygone, going back to a time frame where it like just feels strangely trying to write or chase the storm that's already dispersed, if that makes any sense. That being said, it's fun, it's on in the background type of stuff. You'll engage with it, it's entertaining, it's very quirky, it has very fun sexuality in it, which in features and comedy are often very much grotesque in another sense, in another type of thematic. Whereas here they feel fun, silly, stupid, but it all just about works. I just think I just wish that this would be a cult classic, and we'd be talking about it was made in 1989. But we can't have everything we want in life, can we? But hopefully someone else will be a bit more positive on it.
Hillary?
Yeah, my opinion about this film hasn't changed that much. I found it very fun. It's colorful. It's bloody. It's messy. It is a feature debut, and with a lot of exceptions, feature debuts are not always perfect. But with Zelda Williams in particular, I think that her future might be in directing comedy. I think she knows how to direct actors well. She understands how to make things funny. I know we haven't talked about Carla Gugino's role in this as the stepmother. I haven't seen her play a role like this before, but it's perfectly tuned to be evil and ridiculous and also like laughable. And the rapport between Lisa's dad and Taffy, we don't usually see like a stepfather stepdaughter interaction. That's kind of off to the side. But the rapport is really nice. So you know that at the end of the film, the way this turns out, that these two characters aren't completely unmoored, and you know will be able to get along okay without the family members that they had before. But overall, I think it's a fun, bloody good time. There is stuff in here that people have read into it that I find quite interesting. And overall, like it's sweet. It's really it's violent, but it's sweet. It's about a girl falling in love with a dead guy, and I feel really strange saying that because that's usually not my bag. But this was just such a fun, wacky experience that somehow I don't really know how it ended up working for me.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I mean, obviously, I like this film. Do I think with a couple more rewrites, with a better voice, a more confident voice behind it, this could be even better, could be even higher, and it really could hit that next level? Absolutely. Do I still think this is a fun time that I had such an easy time rewatching? I could easily show this to my friends. It's not going to be the most blow away thing, right? It's not going to be, oh my God, this is like a hidden gem that's one of the best of all time. Absolutely not. Do I look back at 2024 and I look at this and I say, you know what, that film was really fun. I enjoyed watching this for what it was. Yeah, I do. So I appreciate Lisa Frankenstein for what it is in the context. Again, not 5 stars, not 4 stars, but it's better. It's not that like boring. So many new releases, everyone. And if you watch 300 new releases a year, you will see this where everything just kind of gets into like this gray sludge of just like, it's a movie. It's not like notably terrible. It's not Madam Web, but like, it's just there, right? It's just, we're kind of wasting space and time and energy. And you sit there in the theater 2 hours in and you're like, God, why am I like here? What am I doing? I don't feel that way when I watch Lisa Frankenstein. So for me, that's a sign of a good new release. So I appreciate it for that. With that, let's go to our question of the week. Celebrating female voices in horror, we are asking, what is your favorite horror film directed by a woman? Jack, let's go to you first. I'm sure you have a list of at least 15, and I would love to hear every single one of them.
No, I don't. I don't have a. I only have a few. I did want to try and make like, oh, I'll get some abstract one, but really, some of the stuff's so good here. I'm going to do an honourable mention, and that's Karen Kusama's Invitation, Logan Marshall Green thriller that came on Netflix that no one talks about. 100 minutes, frightening, genuinely horrific, has a really great twist ending. This is going to be brought up loads of times, so I'm not going to say it, but Julia Decoro, I can't pronounce the last name. I'd be terrible, but raw. Fucking the vivid energy that film has, like, torments me to this day. But the two I have, and I've mentioned one of them, it's Rose Glass's Saint Maud. Watched it about 1 o'clock in the morning, about 2 or 3 years ago. Stayed with me for fucking months. Horrifying to watch. Visually, like, so well accomplished. Thematically, tonally. The performance in there is like absolutely frightening, fantastic. You get taken on a journey that really does the thin line between reality and the absurd. Terrific. But the one thing I wanted to mention, because I cannot believe this, right, is Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark, which this year is 37 years old, which to me is absolutely frightening. I remember watching it a few years ago. I know Gems did it a few months ago. That film has aged like fine wine, ironically enough, with the Vampire Law. But it's absolutely brilliant. About coming from an absolute shitfest that was her debut as well, which was terrible with them before we also did it on Gems, to then wait about 7 years to make Near Dark. What a way to make a second entrance. To get rid of the, oh, I made a very mundane feature that doesn't really say much about me. Let's hit the 80s like we mean it. What a deliverer. Oh my God, Bill Paxton, Lance Henriksen, like wow, terrific. And it's almost 40, and it looks like it could have been shot 10 years ago.
Nick, what are your selections this week?
I wanted to have like three different selections. In terms of just a strong inspiration for me, Claire Denis' Trouble Every Day has been a guiding light over the past year as I planned and developed Never My Love. Absolutely love that film. It grew on me so much over the years, and I love when that happens. When you watch something, you think that was just okay, and then you give it a week, a month, a year, 2 years, and it's just still there, stuck with you. Love that film so much. Another movie that I absolutely love, one of my favorite of the decades, Julia Ducournau's Titan. Absolutely adore Titan. Such a moving film about identity, about acceptance, about fatherly love, about loving a car.
Yeah, I was
No,
gonna
just
say,
just
and
a very
fucking cars, you know.
fucking cars, the whole spectrum of gender. That's pansexuality, I guess. But no, it's just a very inventive film and very emotional, dark with moments of humor. It's just a full package for me. But in terms of like an underrated female-directed horror film that I think more people should check out, it's Relic. I think it came out in 2020 during the pandemic, directed by Natalie Erica James, who actually just made Apartment 7A, which is a really, really mediocre and bland and forgettable Rosemary's Baby sequel straight to Paramount Plus. But Relic is very much worth your time, using horror as a metaphor for dementia, a house that's rotting away as its owner is rotting away. Just a very dark film that I sometimes think about and I think was worth mentioning.
That was like one of our, I wasn't on the episode, but I think episode 2 or 3 of ClapperCast had Relic as their like featured film. If you go
Oh,
through
wow.
if you go through the ClapperCast history, everyone, just know there's a lot of different eras of the podcast with a lot of different types of conversations. So don't think it's always like this for the entire history of the podcast. I would say this is like from last year on. But Relic is there if you want to hear a conversation about it. I wasn't there, so probably lesser than this, but that's okay. Kidding, obviously. Hillary, what are your selections for question of the week?
I'm sure that there are repeats, and I'm sure that at least one of these is going to match up with what Carson says. I had a really hard time paring this list down. I have 7 written down. I think, first of all, I should highlight a previous episode we did that people should visit, which is I Saw the TV Glow. I wouldn't say that that's straight up horror, but there's aspects of it as far as like existential horror aspects to that were quite affecting for me, and I'm not somebody who's affected by films in that way very often, so I want to highlight that first. I Saw the TV Glow. Aside from that, American Psycho, Mary Harron, terrifying film in many ways. I think especially like as a woman watching that, you're like, oh no, that guy exists, and you have to always look over your shoulder wherever you walk. Trouble Every Day was on my list as well. I agree with Nicolò on that 100%. Probably one of the rare few scenes where I got physically ill. There's one with Beatrice Dalle where you don't see what's happening, but you get the sense of what's happening, and it's incredibly effective. Another one that people don't talk about very much is a French film called In My Skin by Marina Devan. No one talks about this. A professor I knew that taught me in film school recently wrote a little bit about it, and I ended up having a conversation with her. I'm like, oh my god, someone else saw that besides me. That's if you're into body horror or I guess like feminist aspects of horror filmmaking, body horror. Like I said, just really uncomfortable. I don't know. It's a very uncomfortable film to watch. If you liked Raw, I think you'll like In My Skin. Saint Maud made my list. Very effective film. And then I think the last two are more like going into reality. I think Violation, which was co-directed, but one of the directors was female, Madeline Sims Fewer, as far as exploring like actually going through with a rape revenge plot, shows what that actually would be like and how pointless it actually is. And then Soft and Quiet, which came out a while ago. That film, as far as like social horror, and it's particularly like I kept talking to people about it. I said like people don't understand how terrifying white women can be. White women are some of the scariest people I've ever met on this earth. And Soft and Quiet really, really captures that. And it's all done seemingly in one take, which adds to the visual aspect of the film. So those are my female directed horror films. Quite a mix. Watch them all. You will not have a good time.
I didn't pick I Saw the TV Glows or We're All Going to the World's Fair because we just talked about them, but both are like 5-star classics.
Mm-hmm.
I picked two ones I didn't think anyone else would from more recent times. One is also just one of the co-directors. That's The Lodge. Really great film about religious trauma and religious horror. Came out right before the pandemic, and I had like probably the worst panic attack I've ever had watching a movie during this. I literally like almost felt like I had to leave because I was just so like in it, and I really it's a very trippy film. I highly recommend that film. I think it's from the same duo who did Goodnight Mommy, which is not a great film, but is that same directing duo.
Yikes.
The old one, to be clear, not the new one. Then there is Nita Costa's Candyman, which I'm like a huge defender of. I know a lot of people are really cold on this film. I think as far as taking the Candyman lore, and I'm watching the entire series again for Hooptober, so like we'll see on a rewatch how this holds up. But as far as evolving that to be a modern take on Candyman and evolving that, just I think it's really smart. I think it's really effective in its scares and its thrills. Some really good blood and gore in there, but also a really meaningful story that's quite bold. I really like Nia DaCosta's work there, and I like Nia DaCosta a lot. I really liked. Even I had fun with the Marvels, so I think she's really underrated when we talk about modern female directors. I get why she's underrated, but like I really dig that director. With that, let's close our discussion on Lisa Frankenstein question of the week, and let's go to our rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't talked about on the podcast. Nick, take it away. What have you seen recently?
I've seen a lot, so I just wanted to have 3 highlights of 2024 releases. Rebel Ridge on Netflix. I finally watched it after Hillary mentioned it on the last episode. I was like, I need to finally sit down and see this film because otherwise I forget, which always happens with Netflix nowadays. And it was so worth it. Bit too long, little bit too long. I think if it were like not even just cutting story, just like make it 20 minutes shorter somehow, it'd be perfect. But I really liked it. Very compelling, very thrilling, very frustrating, and ultimately very satisfying. It was just like a film made in the way movies should be made, just like classic, classy. Just great. Like Aaron Pierre revelation in this film. Speaking of movies that aren't made in ways movies are usually meant to be made, which I absolutely respect, I did watch Megalopolis in the cinema, and I had a blast. I really, really liked Megalopolis. One of very few people in the cinema who enjoyed it earnestly. Quite a few people were enjoying it ironically, which is a bit of a shame. There is something to be said of just how much we've been conditioned to enjoy films in very set ways, where it's like, why is this happening? Why is that like that? There are definitely just like pacing issues. There was one point where I was dozing off. Some questionable moments in terms of, just like conflicts get resolved left and right as soon as they're introduced, but it doesn't really matter. I just went with the flow of this absolute insanity, which is also very funny on purpose more often than not. And I found it to be sweet. Like it exists in this weird world. It's like if the majority of the films we got were, I don't know, like everyone saw Speed Racer and Cloud Atlas, and they were like, "This is the future of cinema," and Marvel never happened. Like this is what Megalopolis feels like, and I really liked it. I want to watch it again before they remove it from screens. While a movie I don't want to watch again and that they can remove as quickly as possible is Joker Folie à Deux. The absolute waste of time, waste of resources, waste of a good idea. To have a musical about Joker who's in prison now, who is delusional, who falls in love with Harley Quinn, and they both share these fantasies together and they break out into songs. I think it's a great idea. Honestly, it's prime for like at least a mildly entertaining musical. Instead, the songs are non-stop obnoxious. They never end. People started to leave. There's like one point halfway through where Harley Quinn says something to Joker, and then she starts to sing, and one couple in front of me literally said like, "I've had enough," and they stood up and left. With all of us kind of laughing, but me like, "Yeah, you're probably doing the right thing here." Very annoying. I will just say this film, like Todd Phillips, a hack. I think he should have done what he did with the first Joker, which was copying something from a great filmmaker, in that case, Scorsese. In this case, he should have been like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna remake Dancer in the Dark by Lars von Trier, but with Joker. And in that case, it would be amazing because that's basically what he's doing structurally, but it doesn't have the inventive transitions into song. It doesn't have good choreography. It doesn't frame it in a way that's interesting or magical. And it ends in an absolutely horrible way, not because of the ending itself, but because it just doesn't work. There's like a way better ending that they actually shot as well. That should have been the real ending of this film. Didn't like it, but at least I had fun. It was a good date movie, I guess. It was fun.
What a strange choice for a date movie. Hillary, what have you seen this week?
I've had kind of a drought for a little bit, so I'm only going to mention two films. One is Daughters, which is now on Netflix, directed by Angela Patton and Natalie Ray. Read an article about this that got me interested in it, and they mentioned a scene. This doesn't give anything away. It's like there's a scene in a hallway, and I read about it, and I thought I'm gonna cry, and I like never cry during movies, like ever. And the scene came up in the film, and I was watching it, and I cried. Just a very touching, sweet documentary about children being given the opportunity, in particular young Black girls being able to reunite with their imprisoned fathers for a dad-daughter dance in prison. And it's just definitely worth your time. And then the other one I want to mention is Strange Darling. I did see this in theater a few weeks ago with like, I think maybe 6 other people. It's directed by JT Molnar, who I know nothing about. I think over the last week or so, I have seen kind of a mounting backlash to this movie that they think it's anti-Me Too, or something to that regard. But I find it kind of divorced from reality, a little bit like Lisa Frankenstein, where you're watching something that's so heightened. It's like this. It's not. It's not making, I think, like a real commentary on real life, but it does make you think twice about making certain assumptions about situations. So if you want to watch something really twisty and violent and original, because I've never really seen anything like this, go see Strange Darling.
Nice. Jack, what have you seen this week?
I haven't seen a great deal. I've been really busy, but I've seen some sort of like strange stuff. So you have to stay with me. I can't remember if I mentioned this because it feels like so long since we did Dracula. But I finally watched Kneecap, which I meant to review for the site, but I just it's like 9 o'clock at night every night, and I'm like, I just can't do that. I've got work next morning. Really good, really provocative, first time feature. Almost 90% in Irish heritage language, which I think is genius just to get it out there. Especially what's happening in the world now about retaining individual voice and culture. Highly, highly recommend anyone going to it. Yes, it's extremely provocative, but it's all the more fun for it if you like Kneecap. I watched a double bill of Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, the uncut preservation version of it, which is a fan edit, but it actually exists now of the feature not being edited down. I think allegedly it has the most blood ever bought for a film, and every single drop of it is used. Extremely vulgar, but really fun. But it's really weird. It's like if Romero had shot Night of the Living Dead in the 90s with the aesthetic of the 1930s. Peter Jackson's such an extraordinary, like, weird filmmaker. It just anyone go watch. It's such a strange tonal feature about a man just dealing with his mother, and then there's a zombie outbreak at the same time. Fun reference to Skull Island at the beginning as well, which he went to go do King Kong almost a decade later. I watched his weird faux documentary Forgotten Silver about a Colin Mackenzie who we tried to make out that was a silent film director who was lost to the world with like really poorly crafted fake interviews with certain like Leonard Maltin and another disgraced producer that won't name. Sam Neill's in there and stuff like that. Just a really interesting piece of like flamboyant cinema. I did watch Beetlejuice, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was really fun. We'd like Lisa Frankenstein though. There's loads of stuff in that where you think you could get rid of this, you could get rid of that, you could get rid of this, and then you have the same film as its original feature. It's just interesting that even though it is a fun time to have, it just has a really lack of saying anything, has a lack of feeling fun. But it was so good to see Catherine O'Hara back anyway. I enjoyed that. I watched Heathers straight after as well, the Winona Ryder kick, which I thought was extraordinary, really, really fun, really poignant, had a hell of a gut punch as well. It's interesting how like you look at Mean Girls and that's a generational comparison, and Mean Girls did absolutely sweet f all with its cultural impact of educating young people at the time, and then Heathers feels like if it would have come out now, would have just felt much more propelled with that. When I drive to work, I listen to the Uncut Gems podcast, the ones I wasn't able to make, so I've been watching features. I don't want to go too much into this because you can go listen to the podcast I wasn't on, but I watched Ninth Configuration by Will and Peter Blatter. They hated it. I really quite liked it. I think it's very provocative. It doesn't work at all, but it's really interesting. I watched both Terrifier movies. If you're into gore, you'll love it. If you're into like watching your friend or your partner or anyone or your parents scream watching a film and bang them on, I think the second one's a really it just like really bites your patience. I don't think it needs to be that long because I think no disrespect to Damien Leone, but there's an issue where like you cannot elevate the image, you cannot elevate anything, and it just happens every 10 minutes. It's the same fucking sequence. It's tiresome. And after that, I needed to go back to the well. I watched Mondo Trasho by John Waters, and I've only got like 2 or 3 more left. And it was very interesting as a debut. Very, very interesting. I was like not expecting it to be all built upon just sound and not have any like diegetic music whatsoever. It was really interesting how he used sound. Very, very poorly crafted in a way, but also extremely experimental. But again, had like at least a personality. I did watch Megapolis at the cinema. Me and 3 people. I had no walkouts. I fucking loved it. I found it so provocative. I was there on a Saturday, 9 o'clock in the morning, presented with a vision from a man who's clearly got absolutely nothing left to give, and in a gracious attempt at giving the audience something, which I know is a pretentious explanation for an extremely pretentious film. It doesn't work. There's a lot of it narratively where he's cut this down from 4 hours. Dustin Hoffman's character is like, what? The eye part is like, what? There's a lot here where you can feel like on the Blu-ray, I'm hoping to God there's about an hour of deleted scenes because there's going to have to be. I'd love to see a work print cut of this. Just like it would make so much more sense. I thought it was fun. I thought Adam Driver was like having a career, just taking risks. I just thought it was really fun to watch. In a whole like next door watching a soulless enterprise of IP that's been done 6 times before it, or whatever it was, and stuff like that. Being able to watch that or The Substance at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm so happy to watch that type of stuff rather than watching a sequel to a feature. I have no interest in watching. But the final thing is, and I haven't finished this, but it was relevant to the Coppola thing. I'm watching a 6-hour work print of Apocalypse Now. It's very hard to find, but I have it. It's 5 hours and I think 56 minutes, and it's so interesting because it's very much bare bones. There is no ADR work in it. The score is exclusively just the Doors soundtrack. It's just the Doors, the band. It is legitimately the work print that he made. It's all on video. Where you can't hear a word Robert Duvall says in it because it's all shot on location. The amount of detail that like crossfades he's got in there, it's so more experimental. Oh, this is getting really like nerdy now, but it's Scott Glenn plays a character cut out from the original where he actually goes and tries to kill Colonel Kurtz first, and he's there like it's so much more violent, like so much more vulgar. A vast amount of more political conversation about what the US is doing there. there's a few scenes that are actually missing. There's 2 death sequences that are not in there. The boat captain, Lawrence Fishburne's. But it's incredibly interesting, especially watching Coppola's issue with the edit, having to go back constantly. You can understand that the Heart of Darkness, Eleanor Coppola, the late great Eleanor Coppola's his wife, watching that documentary and watching the Redux, the final cut and the theatrical, does not do that film justice. Watch the work print, then watch Heart of Darkness and realise what a world of shit he made himself into. 5 hours of a feature he could not make, he could not release. Too much money, too much involvement. A film about the Vietnam War. It was Vietnam. It's a fascinating example of a director trying to resist the urge of like creative output, but also understanding what an audience was meant for. If anyone can find it, I'll send it them as well. It's such a fascinating thing to watch. 5.5 hours. It's like 289 minutes, so it's an hour and a half longer than the Redux, which I think is fuck knows. I think it's about 3 hours. So fascinating. I'm really enjoying it. He's just got the compound now. Crazy stuff. But that's all I've seen. But it's 6 hours. I've had to watch it. And like, it's been tough. It's been tough. That's why I haven't seen Joker 2. The Todd Phillips classic I've heard, or The Substance, which I'm disgusted about. But yeah, great viewing recently anyway.
Sure. For me, I'm going to start with it is the spooky season. So there's been a couple spooky films I've watched that I really enjoyed. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. Y'all are sleeping on this. This is like, dare I say, as good as the original. This film is a fantastic movie built around queer trauma and the queer experience in a way that I've heard, like, going into this, that this film was about this. I thought it was going to be far less kind of explicit almost. And it's really interesting, like, not just narratively is it about this, but with the filmmaking itself, it constantly does really unique things to tie the audience to that gaze and that experience. I really was impressed by this. Like, I loved this. Sadly, I've not been a big fan of the franchise after this. Maybe I'm just a heartless bastard, but Dream Warriors did nothing for me, but part 2 really was fantastic. Trick or Treat, I finally watched. What a weird history also as far as getting this film released. What a little like Halloween treat this was. Didn't expect much, kind of an anthology film, but not really what you'd expect from an anthology film narratively. I thought this went some really interesting places. Nothing was overly memorable, I would say, but especially as like a kickoff to the season, this has little tastes of like a bunch of really fun ideas that are both bloody and disturbing, but also warm and cozy and fun, to where I think it kind of has a little bit of everything. Then beyond that, I've seen quite a few new releases. Joker 2, I will only mention as a Gaga stan, was awful. Was absolutely, like, even as someone who doesn't like Joker, the original, this was like shockingly bad with like no purpose, absolutely no ability as far as filmmaking. Big Dear Evan Hansen vibes from the singing. Big Dear Evan Hansen vibes, which I know is quite critical, but is what it is. Nick, I finally watched The Substance. Very, very good. Very basic story. I will say that's the one thing really holding me back. It is a longer film, and it does give you a message and a story that, like, yeah, I mean, I feel like we got that already, kind of. We know this narrative, but still is relevant enough, and the execution here was really fantastic. On Netflix, His Three Daughters. I really like the director behind this. I like he made French Exit. He made The Lovers, I believe it was called. This is about 3 daughters who come together when their father is dying, and they have to like reconnect and figure out how they're going to process his death. I will just say, if you've been in a space where like you've come together with family that you haven't really talked to in a long time over a family member who is dying, and you had to like be in this situation, just make sure you're like emotionally prepared for this, because it's just very, very real. And I feel like if that was raw for you, like, this film was probably going to be like quite disturbing and hard to sit through, because it is just really emotional. But I thought it was really well done. The Wild Robot was fun. A lot of people are like, 5 stars, this is the best movie of the year. It was a very sweet animated story of a robot who crash lands on this island full of animals and has to learn how to be a mother, basically. It's cute. It's effective. The animation's really strong. The score is really strong. I didn't think it ever transcended what you would expect from a narrative like that. I told you the plot, and you can probably guess every single emotional beat. Will and Harper was a really great documentary on Netflix about Will Ferrell going on a road trip around America with his friend who just recently came out as transgender. Obviously, there's a lot here about like the state of being transgender in America, especially just like in a generalized queer lens. I think for straight audiences or cis audiences, this is going to be a great look at like how a queer person navigates the world and the lens they have to experience it through, constantly being aware, kind of like we talked about I Saw the TV Glows, constantly being aware of that identity, and obviously on a very explicit trans level here, which I thought was fascinating. But also there's a deeper story here of friendship, the power of friendship, the power of safe spaces with friendship. And also it's great to see representation of an older trans experience. You can't, similar to I Saw the TV Glows, it's never too late. There's always still time. You can be 61 and come out and live your authentic self. There's a scene towards the end of this that I like broke down in tears. I think this is like overall a pretty like powerful documentary and something that I think, especially for straight and cis audiences, this is like needed. But there is an emotional bit here in the third act that like absolutely broke me. They go to a certain house, is all I will say, and it just, Jesus, like you, that's the power of documentaries. That's the power of authenticity in cinema. Stunning work there. National Anthem, another queer little gem from this year. Nobody saw this, but I really like this. For I think the first time Charlie Plummer gives a performance I really love. Not necessarily tied to his experience coming out, his character experience coming out as queer. He is a cowboy and he goes and finds these queer ranchers and kind of just hangs out with them. But it's kind of a testament to the power of safe spaces, having a space to explore, having a space to experiment. He does drag, but it's not necessarily tied to like him discovering he is gay or discovering that he is trans. It's not about any individual experience. It's just about when you have a safe space, a queer space especially, what that can mean for your personal journey. I found that to be a little passive of a film, but still a very moving film. And then finally, I watched Quentin Dupieux's new film, Dolly. I know Max is a massive fan of this, and I think Quentin Dupieux is like a very interesting director. Not necessarily anything there that like overly stands out to me, but this was the one where I was like, this is like a masterpiece. This is a short film that is entirely committed to wasting time, and that sounds really like it's boring, but in a way that like it translate that to also the experience of being an artist and how everyone continually wastes your time. And then when you get to that ego where like anything in this version of Dolly, anything he does is going to be seen as being this genius thing. So like what's the point in putting it, like trivializes everything in life for him, and at the same time it wastes the audience's time. Like it is such a brilliant film that I think really comes together to where not only is it funny, not only is it clever, is it witty, but like I think this has some really interesting concepts to share and talk about. To where like I think this is his masterpiece, probably. A big filmography with a lot of interesting bits and pieces here, but this one like really stood out to me. So that's everything I've seen recently that I would like to mention. Let's find where we can find everyone on social media. Hillary?
The easiest way to find me is on Letterboxd. You can find me under the name Degelle, Degelle. And once you get there, there's a little link, campsite.bio, that will link you to not only Clapper, but these podcasts and pretty much everything else.
Nick?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MickeyGore97, and there's links to my Letterboxd, my Vimeo and YouTube channel with links to my movies, all that good stuff.
Jak?
I need to say something just beforehand. It's nothing to do with the film. It probably best win for me as well. I don't know if anyone's listening to this is aware, but Total Film, after 27 years, I've ceased being a publication of a magazine. Now, that's absolutely disgusting to me. In 27 years, it's been almost since I've been alive on this planet. They've been dedicated to bring movie stories, podcasts, reviews, features, all sorts. They've had to shut their print down. If that isn't the state of journalism or the state of the social climate that we're in about supporting film journalism at the moment, that a titan of an industry can go under, it's just that anyone who supports ClapperCast, Uncut Gems, or Clapper, it generally does mean the world. It's just a little bit of support that, I mean, granted, a lot of this goes through the fact of spare time, people putting their energy on a Sunday, just enjoying the fact we're talking about movies. I know I waffle on a lot, but it's a really good place to be for a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have a conversation. I just think that anyone who does support, I really do appreciate the time and the effort, just spending time with us now, or regardless of what it is. It just mean a lot. And I think that small publications like ourselves, it is tough. It is tough to get out there. It is tough to find a great deal of audience for expression. So I just wanted to take the time here to just say thank you to anyone who has supported us and continues to do so, because it is a tough place to be. But you can find me on Letterboxd, and you can find me on Twitter or X with the username Jak-Luke Sharp, and you can find me on Clapper posting a few reviews. I'm writing a feature about the Exorcism starring Russell Crowe, which and maybe a feature about Alien Covenant I've got in the works, Ridley Scott, about death and grief. So that's a little bit of a preview, but we'll see. I'll get it out before the end of the year, I promise. But thank you very much for having me on, Carson. I know we've got quite deep into Lisa Frankenstein, but I would rather be with yourself, Hillary, and Nick. It's been a really good conversation. So thank you very much, everyone.
And thank you all for being here. If it wasn't for you, I'd just be screaming in a void alone. So I definitely appreciate your presence. You can find me on Twitter at @pp_movie reviews, Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. Thank you everyone at home for listening. If you want, on the main feed, the next time we'll be here on Halloween, because we're talking about The Mummy 2017, Tom Cruise. Could there be a scarier adventure for Halloween? But if that's not enough for you, next weekend we'll be back on Patreon, our monthly bonus episode where we're talking about 2010's The Wolfman. I don't know what our thoughts are on that film, so it'll be an interesting experience either way. But for that, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you then. Goodbye.